I believe we have talked enough about the labor factor of production, which is the most significant, because we will devote a large part of our lives to it, aside from whatever we devote as entrepreneurs or capitalists who save. Apart from labor, other productive factors are also important to the process of production, and our next topic deals with them, the non-human original factors of production. Basically, these consist of natural resources, what economists have traditionally referred to as the land factor. Again, this is a clumsy and mistaken expression, and the term labor factor is as well. I repeat, there are actually an almost infinite constellation of different types of labor factors, and also a very large constellation of different types of natural resources in general, and land factors in particular. Moreover, during certain stages in the evolution of economic science, mostly at the beginning, the land factor was considered the main factor. The very misguided Anglo-Saxon classical school, which emerged in an awkward, fumbling manner at the same time as the Industrial Revolution, was constructed around the land factor. It was viewed as the fundamental factor, the most important one. In fact, a French school called the physiocrats built their entire scientific economic theory around land, the natural resource factor. During those years, economic scientists were obsessed with land rent, how land rent is determined, what land brings in. Tax systems were even created to levy taxes only on land rent. Henry George, for instance, was one of the best-known proponents of a reform of this sort. However, from today's perspective, it is clear that the land factor, like every other capital good, is just one more factor which contributes to the process of production, and that the rent of land, like the rent of every other factor, including the rent of the labor factor, which we call a wage, is determined by its discounted marginal value product. Some land is highly fertile because it is close to a river, or it is very well fertilized, or it is irrigated land. Thus, it is very productive, and it has a very high market value. Meanwhile, other land is useless. It is covered with brambles. No profit can be made from it. It has a very low value. From a historical perspective, we can see that there has actually been a change in the value of land. I remember, for instance, 30, 40, 50 years ago, after the Spanish Civil War, nobody set any value on a bunch of crags here in La Pedriza, a few kilometers from Madrid. Nothing could be grown there. It was no place to keep cattle. What a worthless spot. It was not good for anything. By the same token, no one valued land on the coast of Majorca. In Majorca, like in Catalonia, there existed, and there exists, the institution of the Heru. The eldest son inherited all of the good things, and the younger children received nothing but the worst, the worthless things. Well, at that time in the Balearic Islands, coastal land was worthless, because no one could live on the coast, since there was only useless sand there that could not be farmed. The eldest sons received property inland, which could be cultivated, and where a pig farm could be run, for example. However, tastes change. The standard of living rose in Spain, and people all began to want a second home, so that they could get out of the city. And go where? Well, we suddenly discovered the wonders of the mountains, the pure air, the oxygen, the hiking opportunities. And what in the past had produced nothing of market value, some crags nobody wanted, abruptly became very valuable. When tourism brought a change in circumstances in the 60s and 70s, second and third children, who had received the dregs of the inheritance, that is, the land on the coast, became millionaires. Suddenly, what we valued was taking off our clothes, covering ourselves with cream, and lying down on the beach to sunbathe. And when we felt really hot, going for a swim in the water. Who could have foreseen that 80 years ago? So you see that the world of entrepreneurship, civilization, the market process, is dynamic and constantly changing. Tastes shift, and as a result, what at one time had no discounted marginal value product can become radically different. Still, there is plenty of land that has no market value because it is inland. Nothing can be grown on it, and it has no use. It acts as a game preserve where perhaps someone goes to hunt once in a while. Nevertheless, if hunting suddenly becomes fashionable, American and European millionaires might start visiting, to the point that it becomes worthwhile to build a landing strip inside the preserve. The millionaires can come, kill several thousand partridges, pay a fortune, and go home. A piece of land that was worthless begins to have value. In addition, land which is otherwise useless may have value simply because its owner swells up like a peacock at the very idea of being a landowner, and spends weekends strolling around on his property. So, any particular plot of land may be more or less profitable for any number of reasons. Still, our analysis is perfectly applicable. Some land is called submarginal land. What is submarginal land? According to Mises, it is land that has a discounted marginal value product of 0, and therefore no one values it, and it is abandoned. For example, 100 hectares of desert in the middle of the Sahara. If you go there, you will find nobody there, or in the middle of the Greenland ice sheet. By the way, Greenland got its name because in the Middle Ages there was a process of global warming, which was far more pronounced than the supposed current one. Everything melted, the land became a green zone, and cows grazed. There was no industrial revolution, and there were no problems related to greenhouse gases, the greenhouse effect, and so on. However, these days, no one places any value on a hectare in the middle of Antarctica, for instance, or a hectare of ocean surface in the middle of the Atlantic. All of that, which today has a discounted marginal value product of less than 0, is submarginal land that remains abandoned. And it should remain abandoned. It would be absurd to employ resources in an attempt to make use of it.